Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video, I'm going to take a 1 day break from retail and talk about why I think Season of Discovery fell a little bit short, at least for me. I might be coming from this with a bit of a unique perspective because a lot of the people who have been, negative towards Season of Discovery, especially recently, are more of like the more traditional classic people and saying that they made it too much retail for their liking. I have similar views to that we'll get into. But I'm actually a retail player who was playing Season of Discovery and playing a decent amount. We'll go over, the amount of stuff that I have done in Season of Discovery, and playing a decent amount of it, and enjoyed it. Basically, enjoyed it less and less as it progressed. I would say, and I'm going to talk about some of those reasons there. So the point of doing this video today is because the final phase 4, or whatever, launched today, and I don't know if I'm going to bother leveling up at all. But what I will say is, since it just launched today, Phase 4 might end up being good. Maybe at level 60, everything comes together. I don't know. Maybe some of the runes for this thing are really cool to discover or to progress or whatever. I don't know. It just launched today. So I will say Phase 4 could be completely good and, negate some of my thoughts here. But I did want to put this video out because I saw a lot of people giving their comments about why Season of Discovery was not so good, and it was mostly from the classic community. It's too much like retail is what I kept seeing, and again, I do somewhat agree with that, but I can give a little bit of a different perspective, I think. So, as far as I go, I played a pretty good amount in Phase 1. I played, a decent amount in Phase 2 actually as well, and then probably about the same amount in Phase 3. Phase 3, I farmed out my Soul Thrays. I have some of the Dream Warden stuff from doing those incursions, which I really did not like at all. I did not do Sunken Temple raid though. I didn't bother pugging it. I didn't feel like it. But yeah, I did play a decent amount to get some decent gear. I didn't even unlock all the runes. I basically unlocked all the runes that I felt were the best, or the ones that I wanted to play with, I should say, because they may not be the best, but I unlocked the ones that I wanted to play with. But other than that, I didn't bother unlocking all the runes or anything, because I didn't think they were very fun. In all honesty, I do have a few notes. So if you see me ever look to the side, I'm just kind of looking at my notes here. So for the first season, let's talk about the first Phase 1. This is where I had the most fun. Why? 1 to 25 is really easy to level, and you're doing classic, like, super cool quest lines, right? Like very notorious quest lines. I love doing old classic Duskwood. I love doing old classic Westfall. I love, all those alliance things. Even Redridge is good. Like, all those areas are good, and you're right in that zone of doing all those quests. When you get, basically, like, what, levels 17, 16, 15, you can start Westfall, and from that point on, it's pretty fun actually doing those quests. And so I actually enjoyed the leveling. On top of that, I thought it was pretty cool the way some of the runes were. Now, I found out that not all the runes were necessarily as cool as some of the paladin ones were, but there was actually some pretty cool discoveries, some pretty cool unlocks, and I thought it was very, very interesting in Season 1. And whereas I did not feel that way at all in Season 2 and Season 3, none of them compelled me to be like, oh, this is really cool. And while I do a lot of Retribution Paladin stuff on this channel, it's like the main thing I do, I also care a lot about secret finding and secrets in the game. And whenever one of those comes out, I will have like a detailed guide on how to do it, because I love doing them. It's some of the guides that I put the most work into, actually, because I love the secrets inside of what is now the retail version of the game, World of Warcraft retail. And like, so I love that, and I was prepared to do that with some of these runes, if I was able to discover one myself. Like, I was like, oh, I'm gonna try to discover a rune myself, and then, like, if it's a cool one, load up how to do it on YouTube. It'd be a really cool video. I'm also playing a Ret Paladin, so it kind of ties in that way as well. I didn't discover any. I thought it would have been really, really cool if in Phase 1 or Phase 2, and maybe there is in Phase 4, but if in Phase 1 or Phase 2 there was like a hidden item you had to get at Uther's Tomb. That was like my big theory. A hidden item that you would have to get at Uther's Tomb, and you have to. So I went all the way up there at level 25, and like was looking around Uther's Tomb in a area much higher level than me, obviously, and to no avail. But that would have been really, really cool if they would have done that, and it would have been cool like having to go up there while you're under leveled and like make the pilgrimage up to Uther's tomb. That just would have been really really cool. I think they dropped the ball hugely there as far as paladin stuff goes, because of how cool that would have been. But yeah, so I was very into it. I was very prepared to be into it. I did the raid quite a few times. I probably did the raid, I don't know, 15 times in phase one, and found it really cool. A lot of my guild from retail were also playing, and they thought it was really cool. So it was pretty seamless to have a guild. Now we actually had almost too much participation because at some point it was like, oh well, people's friends wanted to play, family members wanted to play, and I wasn't, and I was like, okay, I can just pug or whatever. Like I'm not gonna like. That's just not my personality to be like, oh come on, you gotta let me in instead of your brother. Like that's not my personality. Um, and so like I even pugged the raid as well, a couple times, 2-3 times, and even those experiences weren't that bad in all honesty. And I had a decent amount of fun in phase one. I was prepared to have fun in phase two. However, phase two was not it for me. I did not like the whole blood thing down in Stranglethorn. In phase three, I did not like the incursions. Those things did not feel correct. And the best way I explain it, phase two and phase three felt like this to me, right? As a retail player, it felt like they kept all the things that I don't like about Classic, and then they put in all the things that I don't like about retail. And they combined them to make this ultimate force of things that I really don't care for. And that's the best way I can explain it, because like, so let's just take incursions for example. Incursions are like the worst version, and I already don't think that they're necessarily good. Sometimes they're okay, but like the events that they add each patch in retail of World of Warcraft, I can't even think of like the Dream Surges or whatever in Dragonflight would be one example. The Zeralek Caverns event, Researchers Under Fire, like that kind of thing. The Fire Assaults as well. Those are like kind of events that they add in retail, and that's kind of what incursions were. And incursions are like worse than those. Now I understand that there was a method of getting a full group of people. You all share all the quests. You all run through them, do them all together, and it's kind of efficient. But that's really boring to me, even doing it that way. I did end up farming out all the stuff because I don't mind farming things. I like having a farm actually. In fact, in retail, sometimes I wish that there was more of a farm to do for certain things, right? Like I'd love if I could just slightly progress my character power, similar to Azerite power. I'm not, in the majority for that, but I don't mind having a little bit of a grind to do. And I think in phase four there are some like reputation grinds or something that you can do as well. And so that's the kind of thing I wouldn't mind doing actually. But this was the worst version of that in my opinion. Like doing these daily quests. I hate daily quests. I really do. I like world quests in that I like Dragonflight's version of World Quest. I like Legion's version of World Quest. I loved BFA's version of World Quest, and Shadowlands was bad. So it's like, what version are you talking about? Well, I love BFA's version of World Quest, where it's like, okay, I'm going to do these ones because they're really efficient to do. Whereas these daily quests are like, some of them are efficient, and then some of them are just hecka annoying. And like, I just couldn't stand it, honestly. It drove me crazy. But I still grinded it out. I just thought they were really, really bad. I thought it was a bad thing to add to Classic. If you're going to have something boring like that, it should just be a reputation grind in Classic or something. You should just be killing things and grinding rep or something, because this is not it. Incursions are not a Classic. That's the example of bringing something bad from retail, making it the worst possible version of itself from retail, and putting it in the Classic. Honestly, just in a Classic environment, like especially if I'm comparing it to Incursions, if they would have put Fire Assaults into Classic, like a different version of that would have been cool, just in comparison. And I thought Fire Assaults were actually the worst event of Dragonflight that they did. But in comparison to Incursions, I might have actually loved it because I just hated Incursions so much. I also didn't like I said, the PvP event in Stranglethorn. I thought that was a bit silly. Just especially because you could get some really good gear from doing it, and it felt like you kind of needed to do it. So I didn't really like that either. And yeah, so we talked about the runes. The runes in phase one felt like kind of cool. Oh, I don't even know if I mentioned it. In phase two, phase three, The rune discovery did not feel compelling to me. Hopefully in phase 4 it is. There's a lot of opportunity for it to be. So I would imagine there are going to be some pretty cool rune discoveries in phase 4. I would hope so. If not, then they're really dropping the ball because there's so many cool opportunities, whether it's in Blackrock Mountain or, you know, wherever. There's so many cool places where you can hide some stuff. That'd be really cool. Stratholme, all kinds of cool stuff, I think. And do it in a unique way, not just, oh, kill the boss and it drops. I like having like some unique thing or a quest line even to unlock it, which was one of the cool things about Paladin in phase 1, where we had like 1 or 2 of these really, really cool ones. Another thing I wanted to talk about with why it felt like a failure to me is since Season Discovery was kind of its own thing, right? You're likely coming from a different version of the game to play Season Discovery. So you're likely either coming from Wrath Classic and then now Cata Classic, or you're coming from Classic Era, or you're coming from Hardcore, or you're coming from Retail like me. And if you're already doing endgame content, then you probably already have a guild. When you come into here, unless your entire guild comes, and my guild quit after phase 1. I mentioned playing with them in phase 1. So then I would actually, to play kind of efficiently or play with players that maybe are a little bit more skilled, I would need to join a guild. And then I'd be doing 2 guilds. And that's a lot to manage for the average player. For the average World of Warcraft player, even being in 1 guild is hard to manage, believe it or not. Because if you raid on 7 different characters and 7 different guilds, you're like, what are you talking about? But that's not the average player. You are a hardcore player, even if you do casual content, if you're playing that much. And to most players, even joining a guild can be a bit overwhelming, let alone joining 2. For me, I like my guild. I like being in my retail guild, but there's no way that I was also going to join a separate classic guild and like try to fit into their time constraints or whatever, that having multiple commitments. Even though my guild on retail isn't currently raiding during this fated season, whatever, awakened season in retail, like I didn't want those things to conflict at all. And now if I were to even try to raid in here in phase 4, it's going to be conflicting with pre-patch on retail. And again, having to join another guild really to do it effectively, just 2 guilds is a lot. So I think that's just kind of an issue. That's not something they can really fix, except for to maybe make the pugging experience better. I don't know how you would do that. Maybe for Season of Discovery, you mess around with the group finder thing. I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't want to like tick anybody off with putting group finder into classic, but I don't know what the correct answer is for that. But I hate pugging on classic. It's one of the things I do not like about classic is the way that the pugging works. Even though it's not perfect on retail, I definitely prefer the retail version of pugging to classic pugging. So now that I've kind of shared the things that I felt were, you know, unappealing about it, I think, and let's be clear, Season of Discovery was meant to be kind of like a test to see like, okay, what do people want? What is the future of classic WoW, right? So if they're ever going to do a classic plus, a classic 2, iterate on classic in some way, what did I learn from this as a retail player who would come back to classic, right? What did I learn from this? So what are things that they should add? So we've talked about things they shouldn't add. They shouldn't take the worst part of retail and put that into classic, right? If you're going to take things from retail, make them be good things from retail. Like in my opinion, the group finder thing, not saying raid finder, I'm talking about the looking for group tool, right? I hate dealing with trade chat and looking for group channel. It's just filled with crap half the time, right? So just to be clear, I'm not talking about raid finder, I'm not talking about dungeon finder, I'm talking about the looking for group tool, right? I think that would be a great thing to add for one thing. Another thing I had was putting the flight pass in that makes sense, right? So in retail, they've gone through and done all the flight pass basically and added so many of them, and maybe too many for the average classic player. But like, for example, not having a flight path up here at Rebel Camp for Alliance is absolutely terrible. This is something I actually found because I was just annoyed by it while I was questing, and I actually found out that a lot of classic players agree with that. Because they're like, no, we want that too. We wish that flight path was there as well. Another thing I'm going to mention is, and I'll talk specifically about the zone that I start in the most when I play classic, which my first character was a dwarf, so I always like to be a dwarf most of the time, or if I'm a caster, a gnome. And so One thing in retail is there's actually a flight path in Chronos. There's a flight path in Goldshire as well, but this is the one I know better. And I think basically, like, since you don't get the flight path until you go to Ironforge anyways, I think having this flight path here is actually really, really good, and it would save a ton of time. I mean, I could even say putting two flight paths in over here would be fine. There's so much running around in the starting zone, and you don't really get much out of it because you still have to walk up the Ironforge the first time. You get that aha moment. No new player is going to miss it because you have to go up there to get the flight path anyways. So you're still going to walk into Ironforge. You still have to walk everywhere at least once, and the amount of running back and forth, and it's the same way in Elwynn Forest. I'm just talking about the zone that I know the best. There's just so much, and it wastes so much time. Like, it's so off-putting to make an alt or any other character. Again, especially as a retail player coming over, maybe you don't have as much time, right? A lot of retail players are playing on a different time schedule than some classic players are, who might play for whatever reason because they have a great job, because they don't have any job, because they don't have kids, because they're not married, whatever the case may be, or because they are married and their wife always plays or their husband always plays as well, right? There's all kinds of different reasons why that you might play a lot more than me. But the just adding the flight paths, let's just say that where they make sense. I'm not saying to put a flight path everywhere. I'm not saying to have 7 flight paths in every single zone, but I'm saying especially in these starting zones, man, it's a lot of running back and forth. Pre-mount zones, right? Pre-mount zones, maybe adding a flight path in them to make some of the walking a little bit less punishing than what it currently is, or what it is in Classic. I think the rune system overall was kind of a failure. What I think what's good about the rune system is it allowed you to play with some different abilities. I think what you do here in a future version of Classic is you take the runes that were actually cool or made sense or that the community loved, and you just kind of make them baseline or spells that you learn as you level up, right? Now, for example, and not every paladin feels this way, but I think Divine Storm is a paladin ability. I know it's not been around until Wrath, I believe, but I think Divine Storm is just a paladin ability, and that it should just be something to have a version of AoE. You can always tune it down if it's too strong or whatever, but having Divine Storm, I think, is just part of playing paladin, and I think it should definitely be something that's in the game, baseline or whatever, or that you learn. That would be an example from paladin, right? I don't know what other one, maybe Avengers Shield for Prot, whatever the case may be. I think it would be really, really good to have some of these just become baseline, the ones that were good, right? Now, this is Season of Discovery, so the runes were about being discovered. Obviously, in a version of Classic Plus, it wouldn't necessarily be about discovery. You could hide other secrets in the game, though, and that would be great. That would definitely make me excited to play it. But I think maybe the rune system itself is not the way to go, and instead you go with taking the runes that worked and making them put into the game. I think what they should focus on more, again, other than runes, is actually just messing with the talent trees, only slightly, and adding things where they make sense, removing things where they don't. For example, you could make Divine Storm a talent instead of learning at baseline. You could put it in for something that people aren't going to take very often. You can just look at that. If you're Blizzard or whatever, you can see, okay, they don't ever take these talents, so we can do that, or we can add another talent in over here and just make it a choice node to take that talent. You could, like I said, remove talents that don't work at all, or you could balance talents in a way that maybe you don't normally take the talent, but if it was balanced better, you would take the talent. So that's something you can do as well. So and then in that same vein, just balancing classes. But you can balance the classes through talent points. You can balance the classes through their new abilities that they're getting from the rune system, or new abilities entirely. And that would be a good way to just kind of balance the game a little bit differently and change metas up and whatnot, which is very successful in retail. I know Classic players don't really want that. Some of them don't. Like, I know a lot of Warrior players who really love Classic, loved that Warriors were so strong in Classic, right? And so a lot of them don't like when other classes become stronger than them. And I get that, because if you've been playing Classic on private servers or whatever for 20 years, it's going to be, and you've been playing a Warrior and like, yeah, Warriors are the strongest, then you might not want other things to You don't want to rep Paladin to randomly be strong. You don't want a Feral Druid to randomly be stronger than you. And I get that. I get that sentiment. But at the other hand, it allows for a lot more different players to want to try your game out and to play your game, because not everybody just wants to play a warrior all the time. Just as one example. And there's certain healers are always the best, etc. It's not only warriors, but that's a good example of one that I see a lot of people that just want the warriors to always be the best. Anything else I have? So yeah, and then I would say the other thing is just kind of, and what they're already doing on Season of Discovery is they're making a raid for each tier, right? They're altering a raid in some way, and I think that instead of altering old raids, they should just make a new raid. I know that takes a lot of like art team work and stuff like that, and I don't know how much resources they have to work with, but if they were going to do a Classic Plus, that's kind of what they would need to do, is put in like a new raid, like completely new raid that obviously made sense thematically with the game. Going down different storylines that are already in the game. Like you could have maybe some sort of Defias raid or whatever. I don't know exactly what stories would be the most compelling to classic players to kind of scale up to level 60, but you have like different storylines that are already in the game and kind of progressing them out to a raid. You could make a Karazhan raid, right? For classic. I know that's one that's put out there a lot, and you'd have something to build off of if you wanted to from the actual Karazhan raid that was already created. I said Karazhans at first because there is a dungeon as well. I don't know how many of the classic players would want it to be built off that, but yeah, so I could see that as well, like building off of that raid, but making it different, changing up some bosses completely. You could even keep the same general structure. Anything that doesn't make sense structurally, maybe try to change it. But that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of work, but it would be a commitment. And you'd probably have to put out a new raid. It would be hard to do a new raid every 6 months, like is generally what happens on retail. Again, because of the manpower that would take. But maybe every 12 months, every year or so, there's a new raid released. I think people could get hyped for that. It would be a lot of downtime. Maybe you could sprinkle in a dungeon now and then, a new dungeon or updated dungeon or something like that every now and then. But I think that's kind of the thing that you have to look at when it comes to making like a Classic Plus. And of course, keeping it all thematic, keeping it all in line with General Classic, especially. And if you are going to bring something from retail, make sure it's something that's loved in retail. So at least it's making somebody happy. So even if the classic community doesn't necessarily love it, maybe the retail community loves it at least, and there can be some sort of thing. But I don't know anybody that loves like that loved Fire Rack Assaults, which would be better than the Incursions, like I said. So I don't know anybody who loves those. I think pretty much everybody thinks the Fire Rack Assaults were pretty lame. So don't take something that's not liked in retail and add it to classic, because that's even worse. That's taking something that nobody likes and putting it in the game. And so if you are going to take anything from retail, just make sure it's good. Make sure it's in my opinion. Like I think the guild thing's good, right? Not for classic era. If classic era doesn't want it, I don't know what they want. Like that's a very small group of people that only want classic with 0 changes. Like you can say what you want. Yes, there's private servers and everything, but it's a small group of people that want classic with 0 changes. For Classic Plus, having a better guild UI is good. In my opinion, having the looking for group tool is good, not the dungeon finder tool, the looking for group tool. And there's lots of other good things you could probably bring over from retail as well, including some UI adjustments or upgrades, just optional. Maybe you can even say, I want the base classic UI, or I want to use an updated UI instead of having like an add-on to it for you, right? So you could make that completely optional, but put that in the game. Those are the good things you'd want to bring from retail, in my opinion. So, in my opinion, boss design, dungeon design, raid design is all better in retail. But that could be argued, I suppose, depending on how competitive of a player you are. So, I wanted to give my thoughts on Season of Discovery, like I said, because I'm someone coming from retail. I did play in vanilla. I didn't mention that. I did play back in vanilla. I played a warrior back in vanilla, actually, and I played all the way through until now, here and coming up in the War Within. but I wanted to give my perspective on it and how I think they could possibly make a Classic Plus or a Classic version that's better. And there was a lot of good things that you could learn from this, and maybe and I'll end this with saying, hopefully Phase 4 is really fun. Hopefully the discovery of runes is really fun in Phase 4. Hopefully people enjoy raiding in Phase 4. I wish the best for it. I probably won't be participating much in it. It'll probably be the first phase that I don't really do because I'm busy doing War Within beta and Rep Paladin stuff, and dying for new news and War Within coming out. So I probably won't be taking part in it that much myself, but I do hope it's really, really cool. And if it's cool enough, if I do get some free time, maybe I will sneak in and play a little bit. So that'll be it for this one. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. If you're already a subscriber, I encourage you to check out the Patreon. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.